This is CBC Here and Now.
Election 2021 is facing another court challenge. I'll tell you why former MHA Jim Lester visited Supreme Court yesterday.
Absolutely important that people have faith in the outcome of elections, and I've heard from far too many people who do not.
Coming up on Here and Now.
We've got some cooler air in eastern areas of the province as we head towards the weekend, but it does look like things are about to change.
I don't think Air Canada has ever really been a great asset to us.
Air Canada, they just cut and run.
Disappointment in Western Labrador.
Air Canada is not resuming flights there even after the airline got billions from the federal government. Good evening and welcome to Here and Now. I'm Peter Cowan.
And I'm Carolyn Stokes. We begin tonight with changes to COVID restrictions in the province.
That's right. Regulations are being tightened for some people coming into the province, but today the Chief Medical Officer of Health also loosened other restrictions. Let's take a look. Essential workers who live elsewhere but whose skills are needed in this province will face new rules. Until now, they've been able to get off the plane and go straight to work. But now they'll have to isolate until they have a negative test. Around week 1 then week 2, they'll need to get additional tests. They'll have to continue to isolate when they're not at work. These are workers who are needed to provide maintenance or medical services in the province, skills that can't be found locally. Dr. Fitzgerald says with variants spreading elsewhere in the country, they need to be proactive.
We have had a couple of instances, and certainly, we haven't seen a lot of spread in those situations, which has been really good. We're trying to be proactive here to prevent that from happening. We know with the variants of concern, there's a lot more spread. We're seeing more disease in the provinces elsewhere in the country. So this is really about trying to be proactive and prevent that from happening.
Some good news for gatherings, though. As of this weekend, the size for formal gatherings is increasing, back up to 100. That'll apply for things like church services, weddings, and funerals. The event has to be organized by a business or organization, so this doesn't apply to informal gatherings. The vaccine rollout continues. This was the scene at what used to be Fong's restaurant in Carbonear, but instead of containers of takeout, today people were walking away with a dose of AstraZeneca. This is one of many new clinics that have popped up across the province. In total, 117,000 doses of vaccine have been administered. And one of the people who was getting a shot of AstraZeneca was this guy, former Premier and pharmacist Dwight Ball, who posted this photo today from Deer Lake.
100,000 doses and then 100,000 people with first dose across the province. And by the end of this week, we anticipate having delivered 140,000 doses to the people of this province. The rollout of vaccine into phase 2 was accelerated by the availability of AstraZeneca.
The health minister says he expects health authorities to begin vaccinating the next group, people 65 to 70, in the next 2 weeks or so. And we know you've got lots of questions about vaccines and their safety. We're going to be interviewing a doctor and putting some of your questions to her. So send them in. There's the email address, herenow.nl@cbc.ca, and we'll ask some of your questions.
Well, another candidate is turning to the courts to challenge the results of the provincial election. This time, it's a former Progressive Conservative MHA. Here and Now's Mark Quinn reports.
Today, Jim Lester is on his farm on Pearltown Road in St. John's. But yesterday, he was here at Supreme Court filing a controverted elections application.
It's very important people have faith in the process, because if they don't have faith in the process, they will not have faith in the product. And it's absolutely important that people have faith in the outcome of elections, and I've heard from far too many people who do not.
Unlike the NDP, Lester isn't looking for a recount, but he has filed the same sort of application that was filed by the NDP last week. Leader Alison Coffin hopes to void election results in the district of St. John's East Kitty-Vitty, which she lost to John Abbott by 53 votes. And former Progressive Conservative MHA Jim Lester hopes to void the results in the district of Mount Pearl North, which he lost to Liberal Lucy Stoyles by 109 votes.
One of the big concerns was, the identification of voters, the restrictions put on voters that basically barred them or challenged them in registration for this special mail-in ballot process.
Rather than hiring a lawyer, Lester is representing himself in court, and he spent more than $600 of his own money to make this application as an individual citizen. His party, on the other hand, says it's moving forward. The Progressive Conservatives believe the people of this province do not want another election right now, and the party issued a statement saying it won't challenge the election in court.
I'm actually happy to hear that, to be honest with you, and because this is an examination that needs to be taken out of the political lens. This needs to be looked at independently and fairly without political slant to it. We have to make sure that the process is outside politics and examined fairly so that people have faith in this process in the future.
If these two applications are successful in court, that could be a big problem for the Liberal government. It could see the majority it fought so hard to win through this pandemic election reduced to 20 seats. But that's not going to happen anytime soon. Court dates haven't been set for these two applications, and Jim Lester believes his case could take more than a year. Mark Quinn, CBC News, St. John's.
A ridge of high pressure is dominating the weather for most of the island, and boy was it gorgeous up through the Big Land today. Nothing but sunshine. We saw lots of sunshine across the west coast as well, but as we get into that easterly flow again, we're still seeing that cloud cover for most of eastern Newfoundland as well as along the coast, and temperatures are reflective of that as well. 10 degrees in Happy Valley, Goose Bay today, 11 in Lab City, and we've got those temperatures in the double digits on the west coast, only reaching a high near 1 degree in St. John's today. Those winds a little bit breezy as well, out of about 40 to 50 kilometers per hour, and that's leading to a wind chill feeling more like -6. So if you're heading out tonight, make sure you bundle up, but there is a warm up on the way. I'll get into those details coming up.
Thanks, Ashley. A Happy Valley Goose Bay man will serve jail time for possessing what the Crown calls exceptionally graphic child pornography. Police found almost 3,000 photos and 75 videos belonging to the man, some involving children as young as 2 years old. Val Oliver was well known in the community for playing Santa in the annual Christmas parade and filming dance recitals and school concerts with his media company. He pleaded guilty to a single count of possessing child pornography, which carries mandatory jail time. Lawyers are asking for between a year and a year and a half. Oliver has since moved away from Happy Valley Goose Bay and is going to counseling. He said he's sorry for what he's done. Sentencing is expected at the end of the month. Well, there's disappointment in Wabash tonight. We told you last night about the federal government's plan to throw Air Canada a financial lifeline. That deal was contingent on Air Canada restoring flights to regions where they canceled because of COVID-19. Well, flights back to Western Labrador are not among those being restored, and that has community leaders frustrated.
It was disappointing, even though I'm not a fan of Air Canada, that we're not on their radar yet again. We've seen this in the past from this carrier, that they pulled out of here before when we had other airlines here that set up shop, regional carriers, and they drove them out of here with undercutting them. And I would hate to see that coming back here again.
In terms of Labrador West, there's never been a great solution to our air link to the province and the rest of the world. There's some exciting things at the moment going on. PAL has added some planes, and we have this co-op out of Quebec looking at some options. I don't think Air Canada has ever really been a great asset to us. I think that we need a better solution anyway for as a community to get us in and out of Labrador West.
It's just frustrating, and you'll hear from the residents. That I just hope that if they do come back, that residents will remember and don't support them if they're not going to treat us fairly.
I think everyone felt the immediate effect. There's never been a huge problem in the interim with getting flights. It's always been the price of flights. I think we've been served fairly well by provincial airlines in terms of the number of flights and those kinds of things. It's, you know, by times it's a bit chaotic, but you know, it still comes down to price, and you know, it still costs us $1,000 to go either direction. So it'd be great to see Air Canada back, some of the specials, some of those sorts of things, but long term I think we need a better solution. And
I understand that companies had to cut back and stuff like that. You know, the other airlines didn't pull out of the area. Pascan is there, and PAL, you know, they were committed to the area, but we didn't see supposedly from a carrier for Canada, Air Canada, you know, they just cut and run.
Now, Air Canada is resuming flights to Happy Valley Goose Bay by the first week of June. We asked the airline for a comment about Wabash. In a statement, it says, as part of its deal with the federal government, some communities will be served with partnerships with other airlines rather than Air Canada planes. It says Air Canada plans to serve communities through interline agreements with third-party regional carriers. That includes Wabash and several communities in Quebec. Well, speaking of aviation, the town of Gander is thinking about grounding one of its very specific policies. Essentially, only pilots can get streets named after them. But now town council is thinking about opening it up ever so slightly. Here now Garrett Barry explains.
On every street corner, Alcock, Brown, Earhart, there's a little bit of history. Pioneering pilots and transatlantic adventurers live on in these street signs.
Well, essentially, the street naming policy in Gander pays tribute to Gander's aviation history, which is well known to many people around the world, actually.
Like Louise Sackey, a ferry pilot who delivered hundreds of aircraft from the Gander airport, and Alcock and Brown, who made the first ever non-stop transatlantic flight.
So essentially, all the street names in Gander are, with a couple of exceptions, are named after aviators, and it's kind of a unique thing that tourists find interesting. That it's a unique fact about the community.
A bit of charm that's up in the air.
It's not something that we necessarily. There's a consensus that we want to do.
Town staff are now proposing a change to open up the eligibility ever so slightly, and the mayor is a bit conflicted. There is the charm factor. But then again,
I would suggest that if you looked at a list of the names of streets here in Gander, the average person with the average level of knowledge about aviation would probably only recognize maybe 15 or 20 of those names.
History buff Jack Pinsent agrees. He moved to Gander in the early days, 1945. And at the very beginning, he says it all made sense. But as the town grew...
And there's some guys right now, I look at the name and I say, I never heard tell of that fella before.
Pinsent says there are others, non-pilots, who deserve some of that recognition.
John was from St. John, so he got on the train, come out to Gander. And he ended up being a confidential secretary to the base commander of the RAF Ferry Command.
Even if the policy does turn, it will only be slight. You'll still need to show some connection to Gander's historic aviation industry.
Connecting the street names all throughout this community to aviation is a fitting tribute and recognition of the heritage of our community, which is unique in the Newfoundland context.
Garrett Barry, CBC News, Gander.
Last week, we introduced you to Betty Collins of Mount Pearl. Collins has been stuck in her home since February after surgery complications left her without the use of her legs. Well, tonight we have an update. Collins tells CBC she received a call from a company in Clarenville yesterday. Coastal Outdoors pledged $5,000 towards a new wheelchair lift for her home, putting Collins well past her fundraising goal. She expects to have a lift installed early next month, meaning she'll finally be able to go farther than her back patio. Collins says she's gobsmacked by the generosity she's received since sharing her story. The first place she plans to go, well, her backyard, and then a visit to Topsail Beach. Well, a service was held in St. John's today to honor the life and accomplishments of the Duke of Edinburgh.
Through all my days in foreign lands, through all my dark and distant nights.
Alan Doyle performed this tribute to Prince Philip, who died last week at the age of 99. Premier Andrew Furey attended today's service at the Anglican Cathedral, which was by invitation only, as did Lieutenant Governor Judy Foote. Foote says the Prince completed more than 22,000 solo engagements and delivered 5,400 speeches, but one of his greatest legacies is the creation of the Duke of Edinburgh Awards, which recognizes the efforts and achievements of young people.
Prince Philip saw the future in youth and created the award program to motivate young people to set goals for themselves that would challenge them to take control of their lives and their own destiny. It was during some of his visits to Newfoundland and Labrador, His Royal Highness presented some of the 7,732 Distinguished Duke of Edinburgh Awards earned by youth in our province.
A St. John's-based group has recently purchased a school bus.
What a great way to get around this big island of ours and reach people who are isolated.
The plan is to retrofit it and tour the island, bringing programs to seniors.
This weather update is brought to you by the Healthcare Foundation Home Lottery. Order tickets now at hcfhomelottery.ca.
Ashley, I managed to catch some of the sunshine early this morning. It kind of clouded over later in the day, and boy, those temperatures are cold out there.
Yeah, it's not nice in the easterly flow, certainly anywhere in that onshore flow, but other areas across the province saw an absolutely beautiful day. Let's take a look at those temperatures across the board. See single digits, St. John's at 1 degree 2 in Bonavista today, but you get away from that in off of towards the west coast, 12 degrees in Stephenville today, and another beautiful afternoon in the rec house sitting at 13 degrees. Beautiful up through Labrador as well. Reached a high in the double digits for Lab City, Happy Valley, Goose Bay, Churchill Falls, all saw those beautiful sunshine and warm temperatures. And then we've got those temperatures still sitting in the single digits, but on the plus side of the mercury towards the coast. Temperatures still sitting pretty beautiful this evening for Happy Valley, Goose Bay at 9 degrees, 12 in Stephenville, and hovering around the 0 degree mark right now in St. John's, and it's going to stay pretty chilly as we head through the night tonight. A ridge of high pressure dominating the weather, which is why we're seeing plenty of sunshine, but that area to low pressure to the south is causing that onshore flow. Same with this high pressure. Again, we get into that clockwise rotation, onshore flow, and that cooler air along with some fog patches. So that's pretty much the story as we head through the night tonight. The winds, like I said a little bit earlier, not too bad, 40 to 50 kilometer per hour gusts for most of us today. And as we head through the night tonight, we're actually going to see those winds ease for the majority of us. And up through coastal areas of Labrador, you're going to still be sitting around 40 to 50 kilometer per hour winds. Through the day tomorrow, generally anywhere from 10 to 30 kilometers per hour, a little bit stronger winds in those exposed areas along the northeast coast. And then as we head into Friday, we're going to see those winds ramp up just a little bit. Now we're going to be gusting anywhere from 60 to 70 kilometers per hour through the day on Friday. Taking a look at the forecast for tonight, we're looking at that ridge of high pressure dominating. So most of us should see partly cloudy skies tonight. But again, we get into that onshore flow, so areas of fog and drizzle will likely develop tonight, pushing a little bit further inland, and areas towards central and even in eastern will more than likely see either flurries or some freezing drizzle overnight tonight. And that's again because our temperatures will be hovering near or just below 0 by a few degrees. And then up across Labrador, you're looking at the potential for a few flurries tonight. Lab City at -2. That shouldn't amount to too much, but that risk is certainly still there. As we head through the day tomorrow, flurries will continue for areas across Labrador, and then we should see that the fog patches anyway, dissipate as we head into the afternoon. A lot more sunshine again tomorrow for the west and south, but again in that onshore flow we'll likely hang on to that cloud cover, as well as the potential for a few flurries and or some freezing drizzle through the day. And again, not a whole lot to speak of, but that risk will certainly be there. Temperatures tomorrow will be sitting anywhere from 1 to 3 degrees towards central. So again, in that onshore flow, you're looking at much cooler temperatures. A little bit cooler towards the west and south as well. We're looking at about 8 degrees for Corner Brook, same thing for Port aux Basques and Marystown, looking at the similar temperatures. And again, those winds generally out of the northeast, anywhere from 40 to as much as 50 kilometers per hour tomorrow. Across Labrador, temperatures will dip back down to those single digits, 3 degrees for Lab City, and then 2 for Happy Valley, Goose Bay, again -6 for Nain, with some sunshine at least into the afternoon. So we're going to hang on to these cooler temperatures at least through the weekend into the first half of next week. But that pattern that I've been talking about as far as that blocking pattern, that's going to change as we head into next week, which means some warmer temperatures, but also some onshore flow for the south coast. So we're going to trade from one coast to the other, but I'll get into those details coming up.
The things that are really vivid and stark for people are the things we do to ensure the harvest is done humanely.
The seal hunt opened last week with little fanfare. In the past decade, participants have only harvested 10% of the annual quota, which raises the question, what's the future of the province's sealing industry? Jane Adey from The Broadcast has this feature conversation coming up next on Here and Now.
Well, the seal hunt off our coast is underway. Some 30 vessels are taking part this season. The Department of Fisheries and Oceans estimates the harp seal population to be 7.5 million seals. The total allowable catch for the harp seal hunt is roughly 400,000 seals, but for the last decade or more, only 10% of that quota has been taken. Markets have been shrinking because of bans on seal products, including a ban by the European Union that came into place in 2010. So what is the future of the seal hunt in this province? Jane Adey, the host of CBC Radio's The Broadcast, wanted to explore that question. So she brought together a group of concerned people for a discussion. Eldred Woodford is a fisherman and the president of the Canadian Sealers Association. Dion Dakins is the CEO of Carino Processing that processes seal products. Jen Shears owns Natural Boutique that sells seal fur products. Shane Mahoney is a well-known conservationist and seal hunt advocate. Here's part of their conversation.
What do you all think needs to happen, I guess, to educate more people in our own country, including our elected representatives, who might then feel that they have the power to speak more confidently on behalf of this industry? What do you think needs to happen to make the education of this industry more widespread? Maybe Eldred, let's go to you for a comment.
I don't know. Like I said, I've been saying it for years. I mean, the demand is there for the products, and if we had the market access to get those products to market, the harvesting full allocations of seals, which would in turn provide lots of economic return to coastal communities. I mean, we had a decade and a half there where we were harvesting our full allocations, and the market was crying for more. It was crying. The market was actually crying, and DFO would never allow us to exceed our quotas out. And I mean, then the EU ban started, and everything turned bottom up from there on in. And we've been only harvesting now for the last decade 10% of our resource. I mean, what a waste of a resource that's out there, that there's so much need in Newfoundland for this work, for this money. I mean, we once had 4 producers, 4 companies like Dion got there, bidding when sealers went to the ice. I mean, boats, hundreds. A few years, I'm almost sure we had over 1,000 boats at the front one year. And I mean, lots of landsmen, everything productive, harvesting this. And Shane, it's never been a sustainable question. We've hunted to the fullest extent there for a decade and a half. Population still increased. I mean, I watched this from the time I was a boy, when back in the late 70s, early 80s. The landsmen rebuilt this hunt, and it became so good. I mean, in the mid-90s to the early 2000s, like I said, sealing was my second biggest income next to crab. And I mean, in the last decade now, it's been turned bottom up, and I mean, a few are able to prosecute it, and thank God they try to keep what little product that Dion and them needs available to them. But I mean, it's a true crime by, and I just can't say any more other than that. I mean, we're soon going to have to smarten up, and I mean, I know Shane understands this industry fully, but I mean, our politicians, and I don't know, because I've had 30 years of it, and they come and go just every 2 or 3 or 4 years, and we hear the same thing at face value, but there's never nothing done behind the scenes so that this industry could prosper back to a heyday like it was. Because I mean, everywhere in the world that's got a seal population controls it. We kind of controlled it with a commercial hunt that put a value on the species itself. Seals were valuable to me 10 plus years ago. Now they've become a nuisance. Now they've become a nuisance to an ecosystem where my commercial fisheries depend on something being done now, not waiting for something to be done in the future. And I don't know how long we're going to have to last, or how long our life is left in rural Newfoundland as a fishing province because of that predator-prey relationship. And it seems like it's falling on deaf ears all the time.
Dion, maybe you can jump in here now, again, with the question about where we go to from here in terms of changing the mindset of offering opportunities for, again, the public to support the industry and politicians to get behind the industry. What do you think needs to happen?
You know, on an individual basis, when you get someone one-on-one, you can tear down a lot of the misconceptions. To my own view, and Eldred has described, 30 years of involvement in this around what is kind of allowed, what is rolled out to roll out is largely political fear. Whether it was in the EU or whether it's, a parliamentarian, a member of the European Parliament voting in favor of the ban in 2009, which was largely, huge effort put on by anti-use groups, created a fear, so it was easy to vote against allowing the marketing of seal products in the EU. When it comes to Canada, there's a very obvious fear by the political level, not so much on a local basis. So our members of parliament here in Newfoundland and Labrador are very supportive. In fact, champions nationally for what's happening. But when we get to the central Canadian, when it comes time for, say, Premier or Prime Minister Trudeau to speak up on sealing issues, I mean, he's not present. And we do require top level leadership on this. And I think it comes back to Canada's position on seals. You know, we don't advocate on a federal level. The Department of Fisheries and Oceans does not advocate for sealing. They simply manage a commercial fishery. And until seals are put into a different context in the marine environment about, what is the real relationship between seals and fish. And when Shane has described multiple levers that exist for us to try and present the seal hunt in the context of, people's understanding of ecosystem sustainability and marine sustainability and blue economy development. At the United Nations levels, largely most of our fish harvesters would qualify as peasants under the definition of a peasant, and there should be afforded protection for people who want to use their local resources. And I think if the federal government and the provincial governments, because I can't allow anybody to skate away from here, but we need to sit down collectively as an industry, as governments, and we need to strategize what are our core messages. And I think if the Canadian government itself did some public opinion polling in Canada about what are the views of Canadians towards sealing and sealed product marketing, I think they'd be very surprised by the outcomes. And I think they'd be encouraged to have a little more courage to, perhaps put together a strategy and start to pull and maneuver some of these levers that Shane has mentioned and present the seal hunt in a new context, because it's a very different situation we're dealing with today in terms of what actually happens at the harvest and the situation for the abundance of seals in our ecosystem that people are largely unaware of.
Shane Mahoney, let's go to you now about taking advantage. How do we take advantage of some of these changes in attitudes that you're seeing internationally? What are your thoughts on how we seize that opportunity?
My argument is that governments, including the national government of Canada, and in many cases state and provincial governments, are already signatories to international agreements like the Convention on Biodiversity, for example, like the Convention on Migratory Species, which commits them to the principles of those conventions, which in the case of the Convention on Biodiversity, it only has 3 principal pillars, and one of them is the sustainable use of living resources for the maximum benefit of people. So we have, in some instances, governments already committed to a principle that should apply to the Newfoundland seal hunt. And yet somehow that is being missed. It's not being talked about. It's not being referenced in any way. Eldred made a couple of comments that are really important. One was this issue of describing it as injustice. The whole United Nations move with what's called UNDRIP, the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and more that includes local peoples. This is all about justice and about making sure that someone from afar does not impose unjust practices on individuals living in another place. And secondly, the idea of sustainability is very important, because when the World Trade Organization did its review of the ban from Europe, I wrote the letter for the IUCN that went back to the World Trade Organization when they made the decision that they would uphold it on public morality grounds. The IUCN, the largest conservation organization in the world, wrote the World Trade Organization and said, we disagree. There is a public morality that relates to giving people the opportunity to have sustainable livelihoods and to be able to harvest natural living resources in a sustainable way, obviously, which, as we well know, for 350 years, the Newfoundland seal hunt never imperiled the harp seal. So I think that what is desperately needed, and nothing short of this is going to work, a public relations campaign, a nice set of communication devices or something of this nature in and of itself will not be sufficient. We tried that all the way back to the Frank Moore's days. What really needs to happen is we need to have money, first of all, provided by the federal and provincial governments, committed to this idea of reviving this practice on the grounds of its cultural importance, on the grounds of its local importance to rural economies, and yes, on the building on the support for sustainable use of natural resources. And the industry and the provincial and the federal government should be, first of all, doing an overview study, an overview examination of all of these pieces that I'm referring to saying, how can we get in there? How can we be represented in this way? What's the best way for us to get our viewpoint put forward?
Jen, maybe I want to go back to you. Just make one point before I raise this with you. I often, when I cover the seal hunt or stories about the seal hunt, I often think back about my experience that I had. Some of you recall I traveled to Iceland and did a series of stories on the fishery there, comparing it to what happens here. I often ask myself when I'm confronted with hard questions about the fishery or the seal hunt, what would Iceland do? Because that experience had such an impact on me that the people there are so confident. They are so willing to defend what is theirs. They're so willing to stand up for their culture and their rights. And I often think, what would Iceland do? What would they do if they had this harp seal population off of their coast? I always come to the conclusion that everyone in Iceland would be wearing seal. Everyone in Iceland would be eating seal. And Jen, do you hear that sentiment expressed by people who come into your store and say, I support the hunt and that's why I'm buying this hat, or I want people to know that I'm passionate about this industry and that's why I'm buying this hat? What do people who are locals tell you about why they make the purchases they make?
Yeah, that's certainly a huge part of it. They want to support it, and nothing brings out a Newfoundlander or a Labradorian like someone wanting to shut down what you believe in. So our sales skyrocket after protests and things like that because it gets people riled up. But I feel unless folks around here really sense that what's happening with our industry is an injustice and is having a negative impact, long term, and is a real problem, that they might not have that real initiative with that at mind, at heart. So yeah, they do. They want to support the industry. I don't really feel they think or realize what kind of dire straits it's in, though, at this point. I attended a few of the sealing courses over the past few weeks, and I found it to be really enlightening and really informative. And I even had our staff members attend them as well. And sometimes when I think about the issues that with people's perception on the seal hunt, do they have an issue with biodegradable products like fur being one? No, they don't have an issue with biodegradable products. Do they have an issue with managing wildlife populations because they're overpopulated, eating themselves at a house and home and impacting other species? No, not necessarily. I think the optics of it are really what people are against large scale. And then when I took the courses on the 3-step process for humane harvesting, I realized we have the most ironic of a pickle in terms of our optics of the seal hunt. The main issues that people see and what deters them from it is the barbaric nature of it, mainly from, I guess, the crushing of the skull and the bleeding. Those are the two things. But those are the two things that we do to ensure a humane harvest. So how do you reconcile those two things? The things that are really vivid and stark for people are the things we do to ensure the harvest is done humanely. How do we reconcile those two things? So yeah, there's a whole host of conversations that need to be had, like on a local scale. But what Shane was saying about large scale global conventions and regulations, that is the heart of it, and that will spur global change, and then we can change hearts and minds individually with those small scale messaging.
I want to thank all of you very much for your time. Really interesting points raised here. Eldred Woodford, Dion Dakins, Jen Shears, and Shane Mahoney. Thanks very much for your input, and I hope people take away some new ideas from our discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jane. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Jane.
Thank you, Jane. Thanks, everybody.
Well, that was part of Jane's conversation about the future of the seal hunt. The discussion was much longer, though, so we're posting the full version online for you. You can find it in 2 places. It'll be on our CBC NL YouTube page and on our website at cbc.ca/NL.
I spent 4 years at Muskrat Falls, and a lot of that time was spent wondering if I should be there or if I should be outside the bus protesting against it.
Turning all that tension into something special.
Some Indigenous artists from this province are being showcased in an exhibition at the Winnipeg Art Gallery. That story is ahead.
Welcome back to Here and Now. Several artists from Nunatsiavut are featured prominently in a major new exhibition of Inuit art, Chamayuk, The new Inuit Art Center at the Winnipeg Art Gallery opened at the end of March, and it's drawing rave reviews from awestruck visitors.
The inaugural exhibition is called Inua, and this week on Here and Now, Nunatsiavut artists will tell us about their work that's showcased in the exhibit. Up first is Bronson Jock, an emerging artist who was born in Postville. This video was produced by Jonathan Ventura of CBC Winnipeg.
Art is such a good way of communicating, telling a story through a painting. You don't have to use words, you can use an image. My name is Bronson Jock. I'm an Inuit artist from Postville, Nunatsiavut. I'm very happy to be a part of the upcoming exhibition. I'm very honored to be a part of the new Inuit Art Center. I just love portraying people of Labrador and Nunatsiavut and just people I've grown up around and respect. I moved away when I went to work at Muskrat Falls. I spent 4 years at Muskrat Falls, and a lot of that time was spent wondering if I should be there or if I should be outside the bus protesting against it. The paintings that I did is meant to introduce the tension between me and, in this case, my father. He's proud of me for being able to make it, but he's also upset about what's going on. And in the side where I'm in the painting, I'm looking down because you know that your father's proud of you, you know your family's proud of you for making it. They're just not happy with what's going on and what we're forced to do. A lot of my other family and friends are, have concerns about methyl mercury and concerns about the dam. So I'm not completely against construction. I'm not completely against anything like that, but working in Muskrat Falls was an example of people having to do things that they didn't want to do to provide for their families and get ahead in life. As an Indigenous person, as an Inuit person, seeing the land you value being torn apart is a tough thing, especially for people who spend most of their life on the land and respecting it. That's another reason why I enjoy showing the land in my artwork and showing what the value of it in my artwork. So I don't just do portraits, I don't just do abstract things. I try to show the value in the things around us. I aim to capture moments of my life where, like, for example, on a dog team, I want you to be able to see one of my paintings and feel the crisp air. I want my paintings to communicate a feeling. So it's not just putting colors and details on a canvas or piece of paper. It's the privilege of documenting these stories.
Wow, what a talent. Just beautiful paintings.
Absolutely gorgeous. Tomorrow on Here Now, we'll show you 4 more pieces by artists from Nunatsiavut that are now on display at the new Inuit Art Center in Winnipeg.
Tommy, listen to this.
Oh, this is country music.
I first got interested in synthesizers probably when I was in junior high school, from what I remember.
I don't know if I would have released this album if it weren't for the pandemic.
I literally got just so involved with the guitar itself.
All right, time now for a look at the long-range forecast, and that means we're looking ahead to the weekend, and I'm really hoping it's going to be nice. I'd love to get out and do some gardening outside.
You
on
took
the weekend.
the words right out of my mouth. Yeah, we're certainly headed towards the weekend. Gardening doesn't look great, at least here in the east. Let's take a look at the temperatures over the next couple of days. Friday, you can see those temperatures are actually dropping pretty much across the board. 3 degrees in St. John's. Now, not a whole lot of weather to speak of, but we are still in that onshore flow. And with those cooler temperatures, we're looking at the potential for either showers or flurries. Just a few of them through the day, not expecting any accumulation. But that potential is certainly there as you head towards the west coast. Again, those cooler temperatures in play, about 6-7 degrees, but some sunshine. So it'll feel certainly a lot warmer than that. Up across Labrador, we're looking at temperatures around -6 for Nain. Sunshine, the story for you. Labrador, Lab City, you start to get into the potential for some flurries and some more cloud cover in play and some cooler temperatures as well, sitting around 2 degrees. And then Happy Valley, Goose Bay, you're hovering around the 0 degree mark. As we get into the northern peninsula, hovering in and around the 0 degree mark, maybe a degree above, but it does look cloudy through the day on Friday. As we head into Saturday, again, not a whole lot, but we are looking at the potential for some showers. Temperatures are going to climb a little bit, maybe a few flurries along the south coast as well, and that's just because temperatures will be hovering in and around 4 degrees. Heading into central, we may see a few peaks of sun, but overall it will be an unsettled day with more cloud cover the further east you go. We may see a few peaks of sun in St. John's in the afternoon, and our highs sitting around 4 degrees. Across Labrador, not a whole lot happening. Shouldn't see too much in the way of precipitation, although cloudy skies in the west. And then Happy Valley, Goose Bay around 5 degrees, and then sunshine towards the coast. Now, over the next couple of days, I've been talking a lot about a blocking pattern in play over the last couple of weeks, but as we head into next week, that all changes. We're going to start to get back into that southerly flow or southwesterly flow, which is good news for us in the eastern areas, but along the south coast, you're in that onshore flow. So we're going to see some fog patches certainly potentially develop through next week, and that's generally going to continue as we head into Tuesday, even into Wednesday, back into seeing some of that warmer air, and but again, looking at the potential for some fog along the south coast. After that, so it's going to take a little bit of time to get there. Still looking at unsettled conditions through Sunday and Monday. And then as we head towards central, we're looking at similar temperatures, 6-7 degrees, and gray skies as well as some showers. Same thing for the west coast, but a little bit cooler, about 3 to 5 degrees. And then across Labrador, you're looking at about 5 to 6 degrees. Some unsettled conditions by Monday. Till you get there, though, the weekend looks beautiful. And then for Western Labrador, you're looking at some flurries for Monday. Wanted to share this photo. Mark Gray normally sends us gorgeous photos. Hasn't been able to get a whole lot of them thanks to that cloud cover. But there you go, Long Beach, Bonavista. Vista. Thank you, Mark, for that photo. If you have any, send them to nlphotos@cbc.ca.
Another beauty. Well, although blood clots linked to the AstraZeneca vaccine are extremely rare, there are still big concerns for many people. This despite Health Canada's assertion that people should not hesitate to get the vaccine.
Yeah, it's a timely topic, and we're going to tackle it this week on Here and Now.
Yeah, I'm going to be speaking with Dr. Lisa Barrett, and she's an infectious disease researcher at Dalhousie University, although she's from this province, and we want to put some of your questions to her. Earlier in the show, we shared the Here and Now email address, so if you've got something you want to know, maybe it's a concern you have or a question about the vaccines, hereandnow.nl@cbc.ca. I'll gather them together, pick some of the best ones, and we'll get her to answer it coming up a little bit later on the show this week.
Yeah, it'll be interesting for sure, and we're already starting to get some questions into the account, so if there's something that's on your mind, anything at all really, just send us a note and we'll try to get your question answered.
And that's it for us. Thanks so much for watching tonight, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.